Uh, yes, please put a capital R for relatable in the chat if you sometimes stumble over your words like I am right now. Thank you. Thank you. I need the support. Big R's. I love it. All right. So for our agenda today, we're going to do a little bit of context setting, determining our audience and goals, and then the stars of the show for tonight. You're going to hear from our wonderful guest presenters and speakers about all the great things that they are doing at their organizations and how social media is moving forward and some of their best practices. And then also, I do want to mention that in the chat, we are going to be dropping a social media best practices guide and also a template for a social plan. So in addition to the tips and tricks that you are learning today from Twitter, Hawk the Vote, Go Vote, and Loud Light, we also want to make sure that we are providing some tangible resources for you all to be able to use following today. Thanks, Bree, for dropping those in the chat. And then following those presentations, we will also have 3 choice options of breakout rooms, building graphics, which will be talking about Canva and how that can be of service to you, creating engaging and meaningful videos. And then we will also have a 3rd breakout for accessibility on social media. And so at the end of the workshop, there will be 15-minute breakout sessions, and you will be able to choose which one you would like to participate in. And so getting to why we're here, why is it important for the student vote movement to utilize social media? I want to also, before I even say anything, I would like you all to answer that question in the chat. Why is it important to you that the student vote movement utilizes social media? I'll wait a few seconds just to kind of let the answers start coming in. And I will also repeat the question. Why is it important for the student vote movement to utilize social media? To get the word out? Absolutely. It's where students are. Absolutely. Engaging young people, best way to communicate our community on our campus. Exactly. So there are several recent studies that show that young people are increasingly receiving their news about elections from social media, piggybacking on what's already put in the chat, right? So a study from Circle found that voters aged 18 to 19 were more likely to see such information on social networks like Instagram, which is about 49%, Snapchat, which is about 44%, and TikTok, which was about 47%. And then Bree just dropped that Circle study right in the chat for you all as well. And now I will transition over to Zoe.
Yeah, at the same time that we see students spending more time on social media, we're also seeing social media inundated with disinformation. And so you have an opportunity to kind of cut through this disinformation and provide accurate information that students and young people that you serve can trust by being on social media. Even if it's cutting through and negating something that they've seen previously, it will impact them even further. So who is your audience? What audience do you serve? If you could put that in the chat, that would be awesome. Also, you can populate who you think your audience is in the sample content calendar. Your audience determines how you use social media. You shouldn't use social media the same way for every different type of audience. So you should think through who you're serving through your social media platforms and ensure that your content that you create actually serves them. So for campuses, your audience might be students, faculty members, other campus partners, community groups, local nonprofits in your area, and your content might be educational and fun with information about voting, upcoming events, uplifting resources and vote and educational information. And if you're a nonprofit, your audience might be other nonprofits. It might be donors. It might be students that you serve, students that you work with that you're trying to get information to. And you can create shareable things in order to specifically reach your audience. So if you know your audience, put it in the chat. And if you have questions about who your audience can be, you can uplift it in the chat and some of our presenters could answer for you. And then the next thing that you should ask is, what are you trying to accomplish with your social media presence, right? How will you use social media to support your action planning or your organizational goals? You should be using social media to supplement and uplift the work that you're already doing on the ground, not replace the work that you're doing, right? So uplifting events that you have planned, resources that you're creating, and expertise that you have into your posts. So these are a couple of examples of ways that you can be achieving your action planning goals or your nonprofit's goals through social media. So, right, you can make educational opportunities. You can promote events, you can send election reminders, you can promote past work that you've already done, celebrate your successes. And one thing that we found is really cool is uplifting student leaders through your social media presence, making sure that their voices are shared far and wide if you have a larger presence than them. So what are you trying to accomplish? Think through some of the main goals that your organization or campus is looking to achieve in the 2022 midterms. Write that down in your content planner and throughout this presentation, I'm sure you will receive a plethora of ways that you can achieve those goals through social media. And so your audience and your goals determines which platforms you want to be on, right? There are different platforms have different audiences. And so if you're not already on all of these platforms, you can be a little bit more strategic about which places you have a presence. So Facebook, we know young people are increasingly not on Facebook. If you do have a Facebook presence, you might want to use that for groups or promoting events, communicating to donors, communicating to other nonprofits, but less so of the educational content. Whereas with Instagram, we know that's where the young people are. If you're creating educational content, uplifting resources and student stories, that might be a good place for you. We know Twitter. We have Twitter in the room here today. This an amazing place to share external and broader events, connect with your community, share ideas and content. But it is used more often by organizations and activists. We've seen an increase of use of TikTok over the last few years, and we have an amazing nonprofit that can share how they utilize TikTok to the best of their ability. It's a really great way to target content to young people, and it has a really high virality factor. And you also can get your message to a broader audience than people that just follow you. And then we also have a couple of other platforms that we're not going to mention too much today, but you can also use YouTube to share longer form video content and LinkedIn to share thought leadership pieces and connect with people in your network. So I'm really excited to introduce Morgan Butler. She is a social media expert, photographer, videographer, and creative director, and currently serves as the engagement and outreach manager for public policy at Twitter. Prior to Twitter, she spent 4.5 years as the digital and creative director in Congress, managing members' social media presences and creating content. So I'm going to turn it over to Morgan. Welcome, Morgan. Oh, and by the way, if you have any questions for Morgan or any of our presenters, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll uplift them following their presentations.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Zoe. I'm super excited to talk to y'all. It's not often that I get to chat with young folks like yourself, not that much older than y'all, but again, it is nice. A lot of times I'm talking to, elected officials who are nearing their prime. So it's nice to be here. So we're going to talk about leveling up your Twitter presence. So how you can take advantage of Twitter to really reach your audiences and just make the most out of the platform. Next slide. So I am joined on the call today. My fellow Victoria Upton is on the call. I think she's under my name because she's my registration link to join, but she'll also be in the chat answering questions as well. Next slide. So it's important to remember that, like Zoe mentioned, Twitter is very much like a look at this platform. This is where people go when news breaks. So I know a lot of people probably don't want to think about it, but like when Roe v. Wade just happened this past week, that's where people went. People went to Twitter. That's where they went to have those conversations. So when news happens, whether it's news, whether it's entertainment news, sports news, whatever it is, people go to Twitter. That's where the conversation is happening. And it's really important to remember that when you're on Twitter, Twitter is very much a look at what's happening platform versus a look at me platform. So I always try and make sure that people realize, like, when you're tweeting out into the universe, like, yes, you want to let people know what's going on with you, what's happening, what events you're hosting, things like that. But to get the most out of your Twitter presence, you really want to pay attention to what conversations people are already having on Twitter and then participate in those. Next slide. So on that note, it is important to remember that Twitter is not a megaphone. Twitter is a platform for conversations. So if you get on Twitter and all you do is you post your tweet and then you log off, that's when people come to me and they're like, Morgan, I only have a handful of engagements. Like, how do I boost my engagement? What do I need to do? The first question I'm going to ask is, are you talking with people or are you talking at them? So you want to make sure you're having those conversations. You want to make sure, again, you're listening to your followers. What are they talking about? What are they interested in? You're engaging with them. So liking their stuff, you're retweeting them, you're commenting on their tweets. And then also, again, making those moments matter. So when stuff is trending, take advantage of the conversation, hop on those trends and join those conversations. Next slide. So how do you do that? Some easy ways to go ahead and optimize for engagement is the stuff you can start doing today. One of the number one ways is using space to break up text. So we know you have 280 characters on Twitter. And while, you're encouraged to use them, if you are going to use all 280 characters, definitely break that up. So if you have a whole paragraph and you just post it like that, unfortunately, people don't like to read. So when they're scrolling, if they see just a big chunk of text, they're just going to keep scrolling. They're not going to read it, which is ultimately what you want. And they're definitely not going to engage with it. So add a couple of lines of space in between. It makes it easier for folks to read. And it also takes up their home feed, takes up room in that home feed. So then they're more likely to stop, read it, and then actually engage with it, which was what you want. And then on the flip side as well, using emojis as kind of bullet points on tweets, especially longer tweets, is also really good, especially if you're doing like an event and you need to get a lot of information across quickly. Use emojis, get a little clock emoji to tell people where the time is, use a little map pin to tell people the location, things like that. So that way, again, when people are scrolling, they can get all of that information super quickly and then keep it moving. Next slide. So on that note, while you do have 280 characters, we highly encourage you to use less than that. Try and keep it under 100 characters. Those kinds of tweets perform the best. If you do need to share more information, this is when links can come into play. Link out to more information if you need to share it. Videos is a really good way to share additional information, graphics, things like that. So when you can, keep it under 100 characters and keep it conversational. This is easier, obviously, for like individuals because you kind of tweet how you talk. But if you run an account for an organization, sometimes it's a little bit harder. So make sure when you're tweeting, whether it's individual or organization, that you have that conversational tone. I know sometimes when we're talking about serious stuff like politics and voting, we can get a little monotone, a little dry sometimes. So make sure you're including that conversational element in there. Next slide. And don't be afraid of personality. So again, on the personal side of things, we definitely want to see your personality on Twitter. And then if you're running an organization account, feel free to create a personality. I feel like that is honestly like the best case scenario because you get to come up with your personality on Twitter. If you're running an account for a school, think about the personality of your school, the personality of people who go there. For a nonprofit, again, you kind of get to be creative and create your personality. So, our example here, Stacey Abrams used a GIF responding to somebody who tweeted at her. On the right side, we have the Black Caucus in Congress. So they have an amazing personality on Twitter. So definitely take advantage of that. We'd love to see your personality. Not everything has to be like serious, cut and dry on Twitter. Next slide. So like I mentioned, Twitter is a two-way street. It's a conversation. So you may be asking, okay, how do I even start that? So one thing you can do is you can discover conversations. So this is you scrolling through Twitter and you see a tweet and either you like it or you comment or you quote tweet it. That's you engaging with other people. So definitely encourage you to do that. We love a good quote tweet. If you're a little nervous about that, I always encourage folks to start with kind of your home network. So if you're running an account for a school, start with the other accounts within your school. If you're running a nonprofit, start with, some other folks on this call and just kind of stick with that network to start out with. And then you can branch out to like your followers and individual people. Then you can also invite conversations. So this is where you invite people to come to you. You put out a question or a poll or kind of a thought-provoking statement, let people respond in the comments, let them quote tweet, and then engage back with them. So if they do comment, like their comment or give them a little comment back. It doesn't have to be anything super long. This example here asking, what's your favorite ice cream flavor? When someone tells you, oh, my favorite flavor is strawberry, you can like it, be like, hey, that's my favorite flavor too. So it doesn't have to be super complicated, but a really good way to spark that engagement. Next slide. So here are a couple of other examples of engaging with tweets. So like I mentioned, the quote tweets, we love to see the quote tweets. It's a really good way to add kind of your 2 cents in there. Again, it doesn't need to be long. Short tweets are always better. Again, commenting. So if you see one another post things and you like what they posted, you want to give them a little bit of praise, you want to comment back, a really good way to engage with folks. And then lastly, jumping on trends. So one of the things with Twitter is that about 30% of the conversation from US adults is about politics, news, that type of things. That means the other 70% of the conversation is about everything else. So if you want to reach those other people on Twitter, especially our Gen Zers that are on Twitter, you want to make sure you're going to where they are. What conversations are they talking about? And honestly, on Twitter, they're not as political. They're talking about the entertainment, the sports, things like that, which is totally fine. So pay attention to what's trending. And then when stuff is trending, if you can hop on a trend and participate, we definitely encourage you to do that because it's a good way to get outside of kind of your current follower bubble and reach your target audience. Next slide. So how do you do that? Make sure you're staying up to date on what's happening. So if you go to your Explore tab, this is your little search magnifying glass icon. This will let you know what is trending on Twitter. It doesn't look like my video is uploaded, but if you go into that tab, you'll see what's trending in your location and you can narrow that down all the way down to your city. You can do state, you can do United States, however you want to set it up. And then you can also see what's trending by topic. So we always have like COVID-19 is a topic right now, as well as news, sports, entertainment. So pay attention to what people are talking about, pay attention to what's trending, so that way you can be a part of those conversations. Next slide. And then you can also follow topics to see what's happening. So this is a really good way to, again, stay a part of the conversation without having to follow a whole bunch of individual accounts. So if you go to your profile and click on topics, you'll see a huge range. It goes everywhere from, again, sports, entertainment, news. You can narrow it down pretty significantly. And once you follow a topic, you're going to be fed tweets in your home feed that are relevant to that topic. And they're not always like the most liked tweet or anything like that. It's just honestly tweets about that topic. So for instance, I follow the WNBA and I get tweets all the time about the WNBA, about players, things of that nature. Again, the tweets range from, players and teams down to just fans who are tweeting about games. So it's a really good way to keep abreast of what's going on that specific topic, again, without having to follow a whole bunch of individual people. Next slide. And then this is your reminder to talk with people, not at people on Twitter. Next slide. And so these are going to be your 3 favorite buttons to do that. So making sure that you're retweeting folks, quote tweeting them, making sure you're replying in the comments, making sure you're liking people's tweets. One caveat I will add to that is do a quick profile check before you do that. Just make sure, it's not a spam account. Make sure it's not somebody who just, popped up or is an inappropriate account. Just do a quick check real quick. If you are just liking kind of random people's posts. And again, if you want to stay on a little bit of the safe side, you can always like organization accounts or other accounts within your school or your network. Next slide. And then real quick, we have a couple of products that I feel like could be really useful to your audiences. So one of those is Twitter Spaces. Next slide. So Twitter Spaces is our audio only integration on the platform. So this is basically like a live podcast. A really good way to reach new audiences, because anybody who's in a Twitter space, it gets pushed to their network and lets them know, hey, so-and-so is speaking in this space, or so-and-so is listening to this space. So it's a really good way to reach other followers outside of your current bubble. If you were going to have any type of speaking role, you do have to be on your phone. You can't be on the computer. Other than that, if you're on the computer, you can listen to a space. Next slide. So to create a space, you're going to press and hold your compose button on your phone, and then you're going to click on the purple circle with the microphone to start your space. You're going to give it a name. You can select up to 3 topics for your Twitter space, and then you can either start it right away or you can schedule it. I always encourage folks to schedule it for 2 reasons. One, you can promote it, obviously. And then when you do that, you get a really nice Twitter card that goes with it, and people can actually opt in for a notification to their phone when your space goes live. So they don't have to remember like, oh, you're going live on Thursday at 2 o'clock. They'll get a push notification. They can also add it to their calendar. And then we also see about 2 times the amount of engagement with Twitter Spaces when they're scheduled. Next slide. When you schedule a Twitter Space, you're also going to see this discovery bar. Anybody who follows you, they're going to see this. So when they log on to Twitter, this is going to be the top of their home feed. It's going to let them know, hey, I follow Students Lead Student Vote. They're going to be in a space. It's at the top of their feed. It's going to live there literally every time they log on. And then once you go live, it's going to light up purple and let them know, hey, they're live in their Twitter space. Next slide. And then this is a new flag for us. So we are adding Twitter Spaces to event pages. So if you see something trending in your area, let's say it's election night and you want to hop on and do a quick Twitter Space about it. If you see that, conversations are happening in your area about voting, and it's trending and you want to start a Twitter Space, if you let us know that you're having a Twitter Space in that moment, you can email gov@twitter.com and let us know that. And we can actually flag that for our curation team and feature it on the Twitter events page. So this is what people see when stuff is trending. So they could see your Twitter Space on that events page if it's relevant to the topic. Next slide. And then this is what a Twitter Space looks like. Once you're inside of it, it's super simple controls, just muting and unmuting yourself. If you want to make somebody a speaker, yes, we can put that email in the chat. If you want to make somebody a speaker or co-host, just click on their profile image and it will let you bump them up to a speaker or co-host. Down at the bottom, the only thing listeners can do is send out emoji reactions. So they can't hop up there and take the microphone from you. And there is a raise hand feature. So if you did want to do kind of like an interactive Q&A or something like that, they could raise their hand and you can bring people up to speak if you would like to. You can have up to 10 speakers at one time and you can always kind of swap them out. Next slide. And then you can also add tweets to a space. So again, this is a really good way to start conversations. If you see something trending, you want to talk about it, go ahead and add that tweet into the space. You can also add Q&As into the space as well. So if you have folks ask questions in the comments under a tweet, you can save them and then share them in the space and have those conversations. Next slide. And then we have recording available as well. So when you start your space, you can record it now. It will live for up to 30 days on the platform. And then you can tweet out that recording for those 30 days. Next bit. Next, we have communities. So I think this could be really relevant to y'all. Communities is basically a narrowed down feed for Twitter. So if people join communities, let's say they join the social justice community. If they're in that community, all they're going to see is tweets about social justice. So next slide. So a couple of ways y'all can do this is y'all can join other communities. And so you can participate in them. Again, if you want to jump into like the social justice one or like a voting rights community, and then you can provide obviously information about what you're doing on campus or with your organization. You can also join just other communities that you feel like are relevant to your school or relevant to your organization. So obviously, for a school, you could join, the basketball fans community. Just make sure you're following the community rules. So if it's for basketball, that's all they're going to tweet about, but it's a really good way, again, to reach additional followers outside of your bubble. And then you can always start a community as well. So if you wanted to start one, let's say you wanted to start a North Carolina A&T student voters community or something like that. And then you can invite students to join it. And that's a really good place for y'all to share information and let them know, like, hey, reminder, primaries are happening this Tuesday. Make sure you're registered to vote. Here's the link to go to and share information like that. Next slide. And if you want to test out communities, this is a really easy way to do it. If you get out your phone and open your camera app, you can scan this QR code. It will take you to the Gov Twitter community that we have. It's open for anybody who runs a government kind of adjacent account, political, voting rights, any kind of account in that bubble. We do ask that you join from your personal account, not the actual like brand organization account, but I share Twitter updates here. We also share best practices, things that have worked well for other folks. So it's a really good way to explore communities and also get up-to-date information on Twitter. Next slide. All right, that's it. So again, I will jump in the chat and answer questions throughout. So I'll stick around for a little bit.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'll send it over to Bree. Thank you so much, Morgan. That was such amazing information.
Yes, thank you, Morgan. So our next presenter is Mackenzie Northup, Social Media Director for Hawk the Vote at the University of Iowa.
All right, hi everybody. I am Kenzie Northup, and I am Hawk the Vote's social media director. Go to the next slide. So basically, Hawk the Vote is a nonpartisan student-led initiative here at the University of Iowa. We're part of the Division of Student Life, and our focus is on increasing student participation in local, state, federal elections. And we do this by focusing on voter registration, education, and turnout. Go to the next slide. So some of the content that we create would be like candidate guides. I found that when posting the candidate guides, to get the most traffic is when the candidates repost it. So a tip would be to always make sure to tag the candidates so that they're able to see it. You get more people clicking on your post that way. Go to the next slide. We also post a lot of instructional graphics. So an example here would be like a poll checklist we created, which just informs people of what they need to bring to the polls. Another example I have here is how to request an absentee ballot and the steps in order to do that. So it's really nice to have those on our page so people can go back and refer to them if they have any questions. You can go to the next slide. We also post general reminders. So this is just a couple example of reminders. So like our reminder, we would have posted one 2 weeks before, a week before, the night before, really pound it in people's heads that in this case, the primary election is coming up, and we'll do the same thing for the midterms. You go to the next slide. We also do Q&As on our stories, which is just a great way to connect with the audience and get them thinking about voting. It also just gives people an opportunity to anonymously ask a question on the story. And yeah, it's just a great way to connect. Along with the next thing, can you, next slide. This is one of my favorite things that we do. It's a voting plan story. So basically, like challenge your friends to share their voting plans. And it really forces people to look up their polling locations and make a plan because they might be putting it off or whatnot. So, and then we also have like a gift for your voting mood. So it's just a really fun way to get people thinking about voting. Next slide. But the most interesting thing we do beyond like just posting on our account is our brand partnerships. So we recognize that our account can only reach so far and generally does attract people who care about voting and are passionate about voting. So we do brand partnerships where we will partner with other organizations on campus. And what we do is we create social media content for them to post. So we will send them like this tier setup that I have here, ask them if they want to participate. And a lot of organizations do decide to participate, which is awesome. And most organizations who do it decide to go with tier 3. So as you can see, like tier 1 would be just a commitment to an election day post. Tier 2 would be an election day post and an early voting post. And tier 3 would be an election day post, early voting post, and national voter registration day post. So we create all the content and then they're able to choose how many posts they want. And this is just a really good strategy because it allows us to connect with a much bigger audience. Not the entire baseball club is going to vote or is going to follow Vote Hawk on Instagram, not the entire art club. So it just gives us a really good opportunity to spread our outreach and to give people reminders. You can go to the next slide. Thanks for listening and give us a follow at Vote Hawk on Instagram and Twitter, or you can check out our Facebook at Hawk the Vote.
Awesome. Thank you, Mackenzie. We at All In love Vote Hawk. Just great content always being shared. So we're going to jump into our next presenter. His name is Cole Tilley. He's the former social media director of Go Vote at Louisiana State University.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. Again, I'm Cole Tilley, just recent graduate, and I served for Go Vote for 2 years as our social media director. And you can go ahead with the next slide. All right, so I just want to kind of give a disclaimer that I don't know the background of a lot of the people here, but I kind of jumped into this job as social media director with no experience in social media whatsoever, not even the slightest design or graphical experience. So if there's anyone out there like that, just trust me, it's pretty easy to figure out. You can move on to the next slide. So a little bit about Go Vote is it's basically LSU's in-house civic engagement organization. So it is quite large. It's been with the university for about 10 years, give or take. I'm not entirely sure. The organization is backed by the Andrew Goodman Foundation. So we do get a lot of funds from them to help a lot of our projects and our events, along with, maybe spending some money on promotionals on Instagram, things like that. I know that might be a barrier for a lot of coalitions, but if you do have that money, we have dipped a little bit in some promotional sort of software for Instagram and things like that. And you can go to the next slide. So Go Vote was a very Instagram heavy presence. Not to disappoint Morgan, but Twitter, I kind of slacked off on putting a lot of things on Twitter. I kind of could never figure it out. Which I wish I would have seen your presentation earlier. So there's just a few kind of principles we use when we use our social media at Go Vote, especially on Instagram. And that's know the audience. A lot of you are probably typically reaching out to college students. Again, this could include faculty and staff and your local elected officials. But for us at Go Vote, our main goal was getting students civically engaged, whether that was voting or otherwise. But we can always expect a good interest in civic engagement from a lot of college students because they just tend to be more passionate about a lot of things. So seize the day is kind of what I brand contextualizing your posts. So what local events are happening, what current events are happening, whether that's state, local, national government right now, and how can you contextualize your message? For example, the Roe v. Wade, all the Supreme Court decisions, that could be the perfect opportunity for, say, a quick infographic on what exactly does this all mean. And even if not that, you can plug sources to actual organizations that truly have, the times and resources to really research and put that out there, just to remove that barrier for a lot of your audience. And it doesn't always have to be about voting. That kind of plays into what I was just saying. That message can be repetitive, even though that probably is your main goal. That is probably the most measurable sort of benchmark on how well your organization is doing and getting students engaged. But you can always sprinkle messages in there beyond just voting, whether that's about redistricting in your state, contacting representatives. And it can even be things like, say, a happy Halloween post on Halloween, or a Merry Christmas post on Christmas, or happy holidays. Things like that, whatever sort of you want to do to fill in that void and just make the content, the information that is in your profile very vast and sort of varied. And again, versatile posting styles. So I did notice after a while, I'd look at our page and I would think, there's a lot of just plain graphics, just a lot of purple, a lot of text. There's not a lot of pictures. There's not a lot of sort of hybrid posts, pictures from our events, things like that. I think it is important to stay on brand, especially when you're working with graphics, but you can always make posts distinct and kind of play around with what you have if you do have that luxury, which if you are self-ran, you do have that luxury. And you can go to the next slide. So some strategies I use throughout my 2 years working with social media for this organization. Again, I learned to make my posts more diverse. It kind of helped keep people engaged. They weren't bored at all, because I feel like looking through the feed, it was very boring with a lot of just text heavy graphics, things like that. So make hybrid posts. That could be they could be graphics, but add some pictures in there, add some color, add some more living tangible things. That can include team member shout outs, things like that if you're working with big coalitions, and of course event promotionals with maybe pictures from the previous event you did last year. Reach out to other organizations. I know that we personally worked out very close with the NAACP at LSU. We also worked with LSU itself and, our environmental, climate change group here at LSU. It does help reach a lot of audiences that maybe your civic engaged sort of profile doesn't really reach a lot of the times. So you can share them, they can share yours. It doesn't have to be like full joint campaigns, which are always good. It could always be just simple post resharing, which could be retweets or sharing your story on Instagram, things like that. And use your coalition members. Again, if you do have a large coalition, or even if it's just you, get some of your friends to repost, get some of your other members in your organization to repost. This will help reach a lot of people that, friends of your members might not follow us. You never know. It always will help boost views. And finally, I think this is honestly my biggest rule is use social media analytics. Not all audiences are the same. Not all campuses are the same. Student bodies can be very, very different. I've went to 2 different universities, so I definitely understand how different they can be. So, just keep an eye on those numbers. What sort of strategies are getting more post interactions, more views, things like that. For me personally, it was always getting other organizations or friends to share it or reposting my posts onto my story on Instagram, things like that. And you go to the next slide. So these are just some examples of a few like social media campaigns that we used. You can go on. All right, so if your state is like Louisiana, Louisiana loves constitutional amendments. A lot of things they will put up for the actual citizenry to vote on, which a lot of it can be very confusing laws. Almost every election season, we see so many guides posted. So this was something I thought about doing. It wasn't directly voted on, just go out and vote. It was, what am I voting for? What kind of complicated law? What is yes going to do? What is no going to do? So that was a very heavy campaign I had last year during the election season. And it was one of my highest interacted posts because I knew that in Louisiana, it's always some big thing to make sure if you go out and vote that you know exactly what you're voting for, because a lot of these constitutional amendments can be very hard to understand when you just look at what they say. And I also added a sources page. I say with any sort of heavy infographic sort of post, I would always recommend adding a sources page, not only to give you credibility, but to also allow, your audience to reach those sort of more well-resourced resources much better, because a lot of people aren't going to follow up and look it up online. If that link is right there in that post, or if it's in a link tree in your bio, they're much more likely to go in and click it when it's just 2 clicks away instead of, opening a whole nother app. I mean, we all know how we all are when it comes to social media. And you can go to the next slide. And these are just sort of the examples of my hybrid posts. I kind of moved towards this and I realized that we were getting very graphic heavy and just very text heavy. So implementing photos. So plain text heavy graphs can become very repetitive. Photo elements help kind of throw that off. And, you don't always have to be super, super text heavy like these 2 graphics on the screen are. So contextualizing posts. I know I did speak about that earlier. Last presidential debate, that was a big thing. A lot of people, it's been very, I guess, memified in the past couple years with our generation. So, people were looking at it, even if they weren't looking at it for a necessarily good reason, they were still going to watch the presidential debate. So it was always good for them to know so they don't, see all the tweets about it later. And then try to implement logos. Of course, if someone shares your post on their story, if your logo's there, they can quickly identify it with your organization. But it's not an absolute rule. However, I have noticed that sometimes it does get very messy on a page to try to figure out where I'm going to put that logo. So sometimes I just skip it just for the sake of it being more aesthetically pleasing and not as busy. Because if it's nice to look at, people are more likely to stop and actually look at it. And you go to the next slide. And then, of course, I had my traditional post. I'm just now realizing traditional is misspelled. So these are just, the simple posts that you see all the time. very similar across all campus organizations and all other civic engagement profiles. So simplicity, they don't always have to be large, text heavy, like those previous amendment posts were. They can be simple, and you can add a lot of that heavy work to the captions. People see election day, they want to know more. Where do I vote? Where do I do this? Just go down, look at the caption. It can always be super text heavy because you do always have the caption to lean on. And then main goal is voting, of course. Naturally, as I said earlier, that is the biggest benchmark. That is the most measurable sort of improvement you can look at. And then always plug resources again. Never assume someone will go search for it themselves. A link tree in your bio is a great thing to have on all your social media accounts. It's a free account. If you haven't used it, just try it. It can go back to your organization website. It can go back to, say, certain other resources you've recently plugged in other posts. And of course, you can put turbo vote, things like that in there. So people can register right away, straight from the app that they're viewing your account on. And then the next post. All right, that is all that I had. If so, you have any questions, anything like that, there's my email, there's my LinkedIn. If you do want to link up on LinkedIn, I did just graduate and I'm looking for a job. And then, of course, the Instagram for Go Vote is Go Vote at LSU. And I'm looking very forward to seeing what my successor is going to be doing with all that. So please give us a follow.
Awesome. Thank you, Cole. We are going to pass it over to Daniela to introduce our next presenter.
Yeah, thanks, Cole. Thanks, Bree. I'm so excited to introduce our next presenter, Melissa Styler. Melissa is the Advocacy Director at Loudlight, an amazing organization based out of Kansas. They're a youth-led political power organization. I love the work that they do and specifically how they utilize videos. So I'm going to pass it over to Melissa to talk how they use videos to move their audience and just have some fun.
Yeah, thank you so much. So rather than, I kind of figured that I would just show you some stuff and then we could talk about it together. I'll go ahead and drop like my Calendly and some other general like communications, so that way you can follow up with me later if you want. But yeah, I mean, more than anything, I figured I'd just show you what we do. So let's go ahead and play the first video if we can.
Sorry, I'm having trouble playing videos.
That's okay. If you want to, I can just pull it up on our TikTok and share my screen. Well, while we're figuring this out, I'll go ahead and tell you a couple of kind of the core things that I think are most important to do whenever we're using videos. So we use video as a popular education method. So oftentimes you're going to see like infographics and very like, you know, I mean, even like our presenters, the kind of stuff that they've done on Instagram is wonderful. And you're going to see that kind of like information, text heavy stuff. But one of the things that we do to really build the kind of community of like making politics more interesting and making young people understand their political power is very much creating this kind of inclusive community. So there's a couple of things that we do that I think is going to be kind of most important things is, first of all, make sure that your videos are always accessible. So this is going to be things like making sure that you always have captions, making sure that you always have alternative text on your video or on your pictures. And then, yeah, I'm going to show you just a couple of examples. Here we go. I'm going to show you a couple of examples of, you know, what we do. I'm just pulling them up right now real quick. Share screen, share sound, share. I'm an active consent kind of girly over here, so nods are good. Okay, great. So yeah, this is just one example. We've got Paris here, and I'm going to go ahead and play the audio real quick.
I know something you will never know. I know something you don't. I know something you will never know.
So a video like this is going to be good for a couple of reasons. So first of all, this is Paris. She's just a human. She's not like designed. She's not like a full face of makeup. She's just like in her room being a real human, being accessible and engaged in regular political life. That's the people who we're talking to. So making sure that we're accessible when we're talking to our humans, and that we're presenting ourselves the same way that, they are often showing up in spaces is something that's good. Additionally, something that Paris did that I think is particularly helpful in going viral. And I mean, this video has, I don't know, all 3 videos are videos that went like pretty viral. So is this a community, right? Like, we are clearly identifying that politicians are doing this thing to us and we are letting each other know. And so whenever we're kind of creating, people are tribal people, right? That's why you root for your school. That's why you root for your organization. And so again, kind of framing it as like, this is Kansas TikTok. This is us. We're informing each other. We're taking an action together. It kind of builds that community. The other thing that we do is we do a weekly legislative recap video. The weekly legislative recap video is anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes, but we'll break it into smaller chunks for Reels, for TikTok, for Instagram. And then whenever on Facebook and on YouTube, we'll use this as a longer, we'll keep it in its full 3 to 5 minute section. So even thinking about if you're doing like longer explainer videos, you can break these apart into different kind of ways. So I'm going to go ahead and share that video now.
Hey, I'm Davis Hammond with Loud Light. Here's what happened in the 6th week of the 2022 Kansas legislative session. K through 12 Education Budget Chair Representative Christy Williams began working on a proposal dubbed Parents' Bill of Rights and Academic Transparency Act. The bill would require school districts to divert millions of dollars to develop and upkeep a transparency portal that would contain every document a student may encounter, from books to posters, allowing any parent to object to a library book, resulting in the book either having a parental warning or being banned altogether, and allows anyone to sue school districts for alleged violations. The bill goes farther, preventing schools from punishing teachers who refuse to teach topics if the teacher claims the subject violates their beliefs, and contains a vague clause that may end immunization requirements in schools.
So with that video, you're seeing that insider language, right? It's like giving people a sneak peek into how our government functions in a way that's really digestible and easy and direct, and how it directly relates to the audience that we're talking about. You're also naming, again, who is the person who's doing this, so that way folks, that we're reaching feel empowered to actually know who are these kind of power players within the government are making some of these decisions. And so that's some of the kind of like insider education that we use for our Kansas legislative recap videos. And then I'll show you, and then the other thing that I'll say too is using a dog or any kind of cute pet is always going to help your videos go, viral. And then I'll go ahead and I'll just show you one last one. And what I want to point out is that sometimes, and frankly, like oftentimes, politics can be really depressing. And if you can kind of make a joke of it, then folks are going to feel a lot more empowered and like we're in this together and that we can actually do something about it. And so whenever you're thinking about the kind of videos that you're putting together, you want to be accessible, you want to be human, you want to be inclusive, you want to just be like a real human. And you also like, there's a time and a place to be depressed, but also like making jokes about stuff is really helpful. So take that into account with this kind of next one. This is a good example of course, using trends as well.
Elmo wonders, what could we use instead of blocks?
What if we think outside of the box?
Say what now? Elmo wonders.
And so that's a really good example of like that's something that I put together in all of like 5 minutes, and you can use filters to make like a dynamic and interesting video of like multiple characters. And the big mouth one, whenever you're like making fun of politicians, is always a really great way of doing that, even just to identify like the difference between like, again, it's this us, and then there's another body of people, so that way you're presenting your videos in some kind of like an accessible, popular education way, where you're including folks, coming into this community, and you're assuming goodwill, you're assuming that they care about these things, you're automatically like bringing them into the club. And so I'll go ahead and answer questions in the chat, and I'll pass it off to Daniela again. But if you all want to get a hold of me, I'll go ahead and drop all of Loud Light's social media stuff. Feel free to DM us, and I'll drop my information as well if you have any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Melissa. I love their videos, so go follow their TikTok and their Instagram. They are awesome. Okay, so we were going to run through a bunch of other slides, but honestly, our presenters were so incredible that a lot of that content was already covered. And we want to make sure we have time for these breakout groups. So yeah, here are the 3 breakout groups. I guess I can just quickly talk about them. We're doing breakout groups on graphics, creating videos, and accessibility. Yeah, so you get to choose which breakout rooms you want to go to. Zoe, Phoenicia, Bree, am I missing anything on breakout rooms?
No, I would just say if you haven't self-selected a breakout room before, down at the bottom on the toolbar, you'll see breakout rooms. If you click on that breakout room icon, you should be able to self-select which one you would like to enter. If for some reason you don't have that functionality, you don't see it, or it won't allow you to self-select, just feel free to like unmute yourself and let us know. And then one of the co-hosts can place you in the room that you would like to be in.
Hi. I think I found a button. Never mind.
Bree, I'm gonna head over. Do you want to stay back in and help folks get in? Okay. Thanks.
Hi, Liliana. I think it might just be me and you. So welcome to the accessibility breakout room. We're just going to be talking about how accessibility is important for social media and ways that you can be sure to keep your graphics and social media copy accessible. So if you didn't know, 1 in 4 US adults lives with a disability, including 1 in 5 college students. Every day, millions of more Americans are having difficulty walking, climbing stairs, hearing, seeing, and millions more experience mental and cognitive difficulties. We also know that BIPOC communities are disproportionately affected by both visible and invisible disabilities. So in order to best serve these communities, it's best to ensure that our materials, including social media content, is fully accessible. So the first thing that you need to know about people with disabilities that use social media is you need to know about screen readers. So these are software programs that convert digital and text images into synthesized speech. Screen readers can only read digital text and content that has been designed with accessibility in mind. So alt text and image descriptions are read by screen readers and in place of images, which allows your image content to be accessed by people who are blind or who have a visual impairment. And it can also be useful to people with certain sensory processing and or learning disabilities. So this content is displayed in place of the image in browsers if the image file either hasn't loaded or when the user has chosen not to view images in case of a visual disability. So alt text is like really important for your social media graphics. Making sure that you are making sure that all images are translated into copy, but then additionally, making sure that your graphics themselves are accessible is really important. So beyond just visual blindness, we also know of student voters, anyone in your community that may have color blindness. So making sure that you're using highly contrasting colors makes graphics accessible to people who can see the graphic but may not be able to see the contrast as well. That is the same for fonts. So making sure fonts are either large enough, like you can see on the far right, making sure text is big enough and not too tiny, but also making sure that you're using a thick enough font. Really thin fonts might look visually great, but they don't translate well for people who have visual disabilities. And then accessibility goes beyond just making sure that people can see your graphics. It goes into a copy as well. So making sure that you're being inclusive in the phrasing that you use to make it very clear, but as well as using plain language and using copy that anyone can understand. Beyond that makes your content accessible to anyone, even if they don't have a disability, if they don't have background context on your work, or if they have a cognitive disability. It makes it much easier for them to understand what you're trying to say and for your content to be easily digested. And then it's not on the screen, but whenever you're using hashtags, one thing that is really important for people with cognitive and visual disabilities is ensuring that you use camel case on your hashtag. So capitalizing the first letter on every word that you use will be helpful for making sure that anyone who is looking at your content is able to read it, even if they can't like break down each individual word. And then beyond that, it was mentioned during the TikTok section from Loudlight, but video captions are really crucial for viewers with hearing impairments. They also, anyways, enhance the viewing experience for anyone who's viewing your content and lets people view with the sound off. But it also ensures that any video that you produce is accessible by people who are in the deaf or hard of hearing community. There's a lot of different ways that you can use captions. There's caption softwares in almost all of the existing social media platforms, including Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. They do open captioning, which means that they can translate your videos directly for you into captions, which then you can go back and edit the text or anything like that. But ensuring that captions is at least turned on for all of your videos makes it so that both people in the disability community and the general public has access to your videos. And so we actually have a SLSV Coalition accessibility guide and checklist that goes over ways that you can ensure that all of your content is accessible beyond just your social media. But I'll go through our social media checklist real quick, and then I'll be able to pull up, I don't have the link right in front of me, but I can pull up the accessibility guide and drop it in the chat for you in a moment. But like I mentioned, hashtags are a big place where things can be inaccessible. So using hashtags in moderation and only using them at the end of a sentence is really best practices for ensuring that anyone can read the content, and reiterating, making sure that they are in camel case. I know that Morgan said that using emojis as bullet points is helpful for engagement, but it is not helpful for accessibility. It can be really confusing to people using screen readers if there is like emojis thrown throughout the post. So to contradict a little bit about what Morgan said, if you're trying to be accessible with your copy, use emojis in moderation and put them at the end of sentences so that they can be read after the full content of the sentence is shared. reiterating the importance of audio and video subtitles. If you have any video, ensuring that captions are put on. And if you're sharing it in a space where open captions do not exist, you can also burn captions on to the video using the video software. There are a lot of video software programs that do automatic transcripts for you to burn the captions on, so you don't have to like do all of that yourself and like transcribe it like from your frame. Following back up, there's making sure that there's strong color contrast between text and background. And one thing that I didn't mention is sometimes we use color to convey information, like this thing is good, this thing is bad, using red and green. That can be confusing for people with visual impairments. So making sure that if we are using color as a prompt to convey information, we're also using text to convey that same information. And then another thing that is really helpful for whenever you're sharing social media or anything text where you're including links is whenever you're sharing a link, instead of saying click here or learn more here, if you describe where the link is going, it makes it a lot easier for people using screen readers and people with cognitive disabilities to understand where to click the link. Because if you're looking at a sentence and it says click here to check out this resource, and only the word here is highlighted or is linked out, it can be really difficult for people to understand where to click. And then ensuring that all images have alt text and have image descriptions. I mentioned this earlier, but all of the native social media platforms have an alt text option where you can plug in the alt text or describe the graphic or image that you're sharing. And it makes it really simple to just plug it in, and it doesn't take up too much of a bulk in your captions. But on Instagram, a fun tip is if you have an alt text or an image description, you can also put it as a secondary caption underneath your caption so that people who are scrolling through the feed can check it out. So that's all I have for accessibility. I will stop sharing the screen and I will go drop the.
Yeah, so if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat, what exactly are you looking to gain out of this short workshop? Do you have any very specific questions about Canva? Have you used Canva before? Just any questions that you may have about Canva and what you can do with it, just so that way I can be sure that what the information I'm providing to you is useful to you. I'm pretty sure that we have everyone who is going to come to our breakout room here. So I will go ahead and get started so that way we don't go too much over our 7:15 end time. Katie says, current organization uses Canva, looking for ways to improve what you're already working on, use it in the past, but overall have not been the best. Would like to be able to create better graphics, effectiveness of words on slides versus the caption. Okay, cool. These are some great materials. If anyone has any questions as I am going through this, please, unmute yourself, or you can put it in the chat. I'll try to do a good job, but if you can unmute yourself and if you're okay with speaking, please do unmute yourself and ask your question. I will start to share my screen, so it'll be a little bit harder for me to track the chat. But before I start sharing, I just want to say that, in this workshop, we can talk about how you set up your brand kit, so that way you always have your brand logo, your brand fonts, and your brand colors if you want to set those up. Also, how you can keep yourself organized, different dimensions for the different platforms, turning static photos into GIFs, and then also the balance of information, kind of what someone else was talking about as well in the chat, the information on the actual graphic versus what you put in the caption. So I would like this to be as engaging and as collaborative as possible. So if someone could maybe give me an example of a graphic that you have created before or one that you would like to create now that we can create kind of like a dummy graphic together. Here. Can everyone see my screen okay? Thumbs up or a yes. Thumbs up, good, okay. I'm gonna move the chat too so I can try to see that better. All right, so what we're gonna do is go ahead and go to Canva. So here in Canva, you can see that I am in our Common Cause Alliance for Emerging Power Canva. So you can see all of our previous graphics and works, things like that. Overall layout of the platform. Are we all kind of familiar with Canva, the platform itself, and how to navigate the platform? Cool, okay, I see a thumbs up. If you need me to go over the basics of like how to navigate Canva, I am happy to do that. I also see Danielle in the chat says, currently working on some voter fact and myth voter education slides. So we can start there. What platform? We'll say Instagram or Twitter. So whenever you go to create your design, right, you can automatically choose the platform that you want it to go on so that your dimensions are correct. So let's go ahead and create a blank Instagram post. And now one of the most helpful tools that I find on Canva is the templates tool, because literally you can find almost anything. So we can start with the basics. You want to do like fact or myth, right? Like you can literally search that in here and you can potentially find a template that you may like. Now, if you want to do like a voter fact or a voter myth, I think that this could be a way for you to get more engagement through stories. How many folks have done like polls or quizzes or just kind of like engaging things on their Instagram stories? Sure. Danielle, was that kind of the hope for this thing, or was that, or would this be maybe both or just an Instagram post?
So the fact and myth would be more story oriented, especially for engagement with students. But we have other slides that like I'm personally working on right now that would be more post.
Yeah, okay.
Oriented. Yeah, but this is more engaging for stories.
No worries, no worries. So a really quick tip that you may or may not know, I'm just gonna choose one for the sake of choosing. I'm gonna choose this one because why not? But let's say you started it here and you wanted to actually convert this into a story. Super easy, you just go to resize and then you can search Instagram story and copy and resize and voila. You have yourself an Instagram story that you can now start editing. I am going to come back into this one just to address the effectiveness of words on slides versus words in the caption. So how I like to use Canva is I make my graphic and I use the comment to start testing out whatever my caption is going to be. On your actual graphic, the fewer words you have, the better. And so you want to make sure that when you are putting your words on the slide, ask yourself, can I get this down into 7 words or less? Can I get what I'm trying to convey down in 7 words or less? If you can, that's awesome. And then you can go ahead and start typing out your caption, and your caption can have and hold more of the actual information that you want. One of the ways that you can eliminate or mitigate that issue if you're having like too much information is, for example, using bit.ly links. So that way you're creating short links to like more content. So that way you can literally, instead of you like having to put like a long link on the slide itself or on the graphic itself, you can actually make a bit.ly link, and then that can go like if you have like a link tree to put in your bio, or you can put the link, that short link, directly in your bio if you only have one. You also want to make sure that you are prioritizing. I'm going to go into some of our sample graphics actually. You want to make sure that you're prioritizing your information by size and font type. And so I am going to, just give me 1 second. I'm going to go into our Artivism posts and give you just a few examples of those. And so what you want to do when you're balancing out your post is whatever is of most importance should take up most of your word size. And then whatever you want to be second most important should be second in font size. And then if you have extra information that like it's great to have, but it's not necessarily the focal point, then you can make that smaller information. And then of course, use your caption to go ahead and put all the information that you would like. Make sure that in your caption, you are using proper hashtags and all of the other common practices that folks use on social media. I want to pause there and ask if there was a more specific question that anyone had about the effectiveness of words, or like the sizing or placement or hierarchy of words.
I guess in my case again, it's more, I mean, there's going to be some events that we're going to be doing, but it's more just getting out information to students, which does mean it is going to be busier. Slides, especially, for example, University of Vermont has multiple wards within it, each having its own polling place. And so something like that would be possibly more effective on a slide than in the caption, especially because there would be a lot of information.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull up. So one of our HBCU fellows, she had a week of voter information guides and events. So she did a Instagram takeover, and it was a voter education takeover about local and state seats on the Fulton County ballot. And so here in this graphic, you can see what she did was she had each elected official, what their job, or like basically what the overall job is, and then also what are their important duties. So again, this is a lot of information on a slide, but again, you can prioritize by saying, okay, what's most important? The actual role that I'm talking about, right? And then what's second and most important to me is like, what are they responsible for and how do they affect my daily life? This is how they do that. And she used a tertiary, but she used a highlight in this bright red circle that is not almost anywhere else on the slide, to make sure that folks were paying attention to those duties themselves. And then this part is also important. So it is on the slide, but it does not supersede the actual position and then the highlighting of what that person does. Is that a little more helpful for you?
Yes, thank you so much.
I want to pause there. Any other questions, or are there any other specific things? I feel so bad because I was given like 10 to 15 minutes to do this. And so I just want to make sure that I'm answering questions and not just showing you things that don't matter.
I have a question.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about the effectiveness of like graphics versus actual text, and like what ratio, if there is any, that we should be focusing on?
Absolutely. I think so currently my I guess my common practice, I don't say best practices, but my common practice is to ask myself, who am I trying to reach and what am I trying to tell them? And so basically, if you are trying to engage people and you want them to talk to you, it's best to use any photos that you can of people. And then if it's like an infographic where it's just kind of like a push communication where you're just pushing it out and you're not necessarily expecting much back other than, you know, likes or plus ones, things like that, then it's okay to have more of a graphic type of piece for yourself. I can, let me think, come back to our homepage. And so, for example, if you're doing something like an intro, right? When we introed our interns last year, we balanced 50-50, right? So it's more so of like, hey, this is our great intern. And then the other 50 part, oh my gosh, 57 seconds. The other part that's really important is like, what is this intern doing? How can I reach them? What are they going to be doing? And so to learn more about what they're going to be doing. So if you want to intro or if you want engagement, I would encourage you to use people. And if you want like specific push communications, I think graphics are okay for that. And if you want a mixture of both, you can try to balance them out in something like this. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then I do want to mention before the breakout room close, I'm going to try to hurry up and find it. But if you are also wanting to, for example, one thing that has been really useful is if you actually like have some information that you want to get out, but you also want to add people, removing the background feature on images in Canva is really helpful. It's a way to put people in a graphic.
Hello.
I was mid-sentence.
Well, I just wanted to open the floor to see if anyone wanted to share anything they learned in their breakout room. You can go ahead and unmute and kind of like share what was going on. If you're comfortable, totally. Like you can feel free to like drop it in the chat as well if you want to.
I can talk about what we learned a little bit about. So I was in the Canva one, and we were talking about how to create eye-catching and effective like posters and different like information grabbing kind of images or graphics, and kind of the ratio between the different types of like graphics versus actual information or text, and then how to do like Instagram stories or do different medias. So
That's awesome. Does anyone else want to share? Well, if not, I'll kick it over to Zoe to wrap us up, or Bernicia, or whoever really wants to talk.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming to the SLSP Coalition's communications social media training. We have a couple more of these coming up next month. We have an earned media training and a alternative communications methods training. So definitely check those out. If you're interested in getting involved with this work and doing some social media training on your own, or collaborating with this awesome group of presenters, we have a communications subcommittee. I will pull up you can sign up for our communication subcommittee and be in community and in conversation with all of these fantastic people here today. I will put it in the chat. But anyway, I think that's all from our team. If anybody else wants to say anything, but thank you so much for coming. And thank you so much to our presenters for your amazing expertise. Have a great evening.
Okay, cool. We'll just go ahead and get started, and if more people join us, they join us. So if you're in this group, it's because you want to talk about video, following up the incredible presentation that Melissa did. So I'm going to walk through just a couple slides. There's so much we could talk about video. So what I'm going to do is just talk about some of my best tips from what I've seen, from what I've watched from others, and what I've done myself, and then talk through some tools. And then honestly, I just want to open it up and see if we can talk about some of the videos you all want to create or you have created, like troubleshoot, answer questions, all of that jam. So I actually cannot see where I can share my screen. I wonder if I can't share it because, oh, there it is, I found it. Okay, hoping you all can see the screen. I think there's a chat up here, let me check that. Okay. So here are some of my best tips for videos on social. First tip, which is a great transition from what Melissa was talking about, is finding some trends, some styles. This is something super easy you can do going through your For You page on TikTok. You can go through the Explore page, search Reels, like how are other people using trends, using sounds, using like meme formats. Find something that you could use for you. I think a really good example of this right now is, you know, the people who are like, he's a 10, but he doesn't vote early. You know, like you can take those trends and put them into a video, make them work for you. I know lots of y'all are doing events. If you're hosting an event, take some video, even if it's just short clips here and there. You can always pull it together into a montage or like a longer clip of some of that event footage. I'll show an example in a second. And then another one of my tips is if the sound in your video is not perfect, you can always like put music over it and then do a voiceover on top of it. I love voiceovers. I think they feel really like genuine and really personal. I'm gonna play this video. Hopefully it plays for you all. Can you all hear that?
I would be so relieved with so much financial burden that I would feel like I would be able to make choices that I don't get to make on a daily basis.
I'd start saving so I could travel and educate myself while my summers off as a middle schooler. I'd be able to live my life freely, maybe buy a house, support my family, and just be happy.
We have dreams of buying homes, starting families, and experiencing financial freedom. But more than $1.7 trillion of student debt is stopping our generation from reaching our dreams. We say no more. It is time to build dreams, not debt. With the stroke of a pen, President Biden can make all these dreams a reality. We're calling on Biden to cancel student debt, all of it. Let's create a future where young people are living out their dreams instead of living in debt. Take action.
Okay, cool. So that was an example of taking clips from an event, using voiceover, using some music, and I used a completely free tool on my phone to do that. I'll talk about tools in a second. Okay, some other tips that I have here. Okay. Face to camera can be super powerful. Like when people make eye contact, even if it's through camera, that can have a major effect. So if you have testimonies, if you have critical information, if you have personal stories, like utilizing storytelling, try and find a way that you can capture that on video. Even if it is not the most like curated ring light thing, like those videos do really well because they feel genuine, they feel authentic, and they feel very personal. Melissa actually mentioned this before, but just reiterating that captions are a must, 100% for accessibility, but also just strategy-wise, it's in your favor because a lot of people are scrolling through videos on mute, like they're not actually listening to them. So having captions is a must. And then another recommendation I have, if you feel like you're tight on capacity, is to take your static content and to find a way to make it into a video. You can do this pretty easily in Canva. You can do this in Facebook and like their designer studio. Here's an example of a tweet that I tweeted. I put it on top of a video, added music. Within 3 hours, this reel had over 30,000 views. I don't know if it was just right place, right time, but I will say that I do think this method works for a lot of nonprofit organizations. I added music like in the native Instagram app, so you don't hear it here, but super simple. I'm probably going to use this, you know, in the future when I think we have a really good tweet that we want to share. Okay, and then last thing here, not everyone has the money and resources to pay for super fancy tools, so use the free tools you have access to. Canva is incredible. I make so many videos in Canva. TikTok, you can use all the editing features in TikTok and then download it and post it to other platforms. Instagram stories, you can upload a video, throw on your text, throw in some stickers, download that. There you have a video. Capwing is a really popular tool for like transcribing, for subtitles, for video editing. That first video I showed, I did that entire thing on my phone on InShot. InShot, there's like ads. So it's essentially free, but there are some ads in there. This last one I just learned about yesterday. It's not completely free, but it is significantly less expensive than the traditional Photoshop or like what's in the Adobe suite. The Express version is like all the best pieces of Photoshop, but in a much smaller package and super, super affordable. Yeah, so those are some tools. Those are some of my best tips. As someone who's like trying to get better at video, these are the things that have been the most, like the easiest for me to understand, the easiest for me to implement as someone who doesn't have that much time in a day to make like beautiful, curated, edited videos. So yeah, okay, I'm gonna stop sharing. I also want to leave the rest of this session for if you have questions or if you like have an idea, this is your place to kind of workshop that out. You can also use the chat too if you're not feeling like it's a video or off mute day. No questions? I will ask Tyler or Jessica, have you all used videos recently in your social media work?
Well, I haven't really gotten started, so that's why I'm here. But I mean, your presentation was pretty straightforward, and but thank you for all those great ideas, and yeah.
Got it. Okay, you too, Jessica. Yeah. So you all are getting started with social media on your campus organizations?
Yeah, pretty much. Well, yeah, I'm part of a new org that's trying to do some statewide stuff. So I'm not sure how much video I will be doing, but I figured I might as well sit in and hear it out.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, like even if you just have static content, you can throw it into an Instagram story, add some stickers, like make it just a little bit more engaging. It'll tend to perform a little bit better. You know, like even I feel like a popular TikTok format is like a video that's in the background and a person is like in the foreground, like just resharing information or like reiterating a point. So there's tons of ways to make video where you're not actually creating original content. You're like uplifting current information, highlighting it in a different way, all of that kind of stuff. Cool. I do have a question for Melissa, if you're able to. It's fine if you don't know off the top of your head, but your most impactful video, or like maybe like the one that got the most engagement or one that had a really high reach, do you know what that was? And could you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so there's a couple of videos. There's like 3 kinds of formats that we've gotten the most engagement on. One is reposting video clips of politicians doing shady things. So I can probably, like, that was our most popular video last year. And let me see. And we will do like a bunch of those. So like, you know, we'll go through legislative debates and committee debates and public appearances. And so, for example, the video that got the most engagement was the Senate president. So that's the state Senate president. And she was at a private fundraiser, but it was recorded, her talking exactly about how she planned on gerrymandering. And so reposting that video, that's what got the most engagement last year. And then there's other things that will, like the legislative recap videos, they'll, you know, it sort of kind of depends on the topic. Like, you want to try and make things as accessible as possible and as relatable as possible. Like, I used that one about education because that like also impacts college students. And so whenever you're able to, and of course, like, I'm at a conference right now and somebody said this like really great line that was like, even if you're not paying attention to politics, politics is paying attention to you. And so reframing any of these given issues about how it's going to relate to your audience is something that's helpful. So whenever we were talking about restrictions for how we talk about, you know, history and specifically like racism, sexism, homophobia, et cetera, and its relationship in our history, whenever we clearly talk about like, this is how it's going to impact Kansas colleges. This is the person, and this is what she is proposing. Like, this is the politician, this is what she's proposing, this is how it impacts you. And doing that in like a very short format, that's what our legislative recaps look like. We also don't tell people what to think about these things, right? So none of these things necessarily come with an action item, but we will do videos where we say like, you know, a day in a life of an organizer, where, you know, we'll show young people giving testimony, and they'll, you know, talk about what it's like to write their testimony that they give to the legislature and that kind of thing. So we'll do that, but we do them kind of separately. So that way it's all part of, like, we're never going to tell anybody what they should be doing, but we just want to make sure that everything, the activities and the things that are happening, are accessible to people. And then the last thing that is most popular is like our jokes. Like a lot of, here, this one is pretty good that, oops. Shh. Quiet now. This one is pretty good. I'm going to drop it in the chat. If you'd prefer, I can share my screen again, but this is the one that we posted. That's Paris again, because she's just a sweet little angel baby. That's gone like, I wouldn't say this is like super viral, but it's got like, you know, 27,000 views right now. So this is our most popular one over the last, you know, little bit. We don't ever pay for any of our content. And so, you know, we don't promote our stuff. And so you're going to see, especially on like TikTok, unless you're promoting your videos, chances are not every video goes viral. You'll see most content creators have like ebbs and flows where they want to keep the algorithm also is about keeping you hooked on making content. And so sometimes you'll be really popular and then it'll kind of calm down, but then you'll get really popular again, and maintaining consistency through that is also something that's really important.
Cool. Thanks. I love that. All right. It looks like this breakout room is going to close in 30 seconds. But yeah, feel free to message us afterward and let us know if you have any questions or if you start doing video and just want to brainstorm on it, Tyler.
Sounds great. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Hello, hello. Welcome back. I hope you all had wonderful conversations.
Awesome.
Hello.
I was mid-sentence.
Well, I just wanted to open the floor to see if anyone wanted to share anything they learned in their breakout room. You can go ahead and unmute and kind of like share what was going on. If you're comfortable, totally. Like you can feel free to like drop it in the chat as well if you want to.
I can talk about what we learned a little bit about. So I was in the Canva one, and we were talking about how to create eye-catching and effective like posters and different like information grabbing kind of images or graphics, and kind of the ratio between the different types of like graphics versus actual information or text, and then how to do like Instagram stories or do different medias. So
That's awesome. Does anyone else want to share? Well, if not, I'll kick it over to Zoe to wrap us up, or Bernicia, or whoever really wants to talk.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming to the SLSP Coalition's communications social media training. We have a couple more of these coming up next month. We have an earned media training and a alternative communications methods training. So definitely check those out. If you're interested in getting involved with this work and doing some social media training on your own, or collaborating with this awesome group of presenters, we have a communications subcommittee. I will pull up you can sign up for our communication subcommittee and be in community and in conversation with all of these fantastic people here today. I will put it in the chat. But anyway, I think that's all from our team. If anybody else wants to say anything, but thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much to our presenters for your amazing expertise. Have a great evening. Yay!
Woo woo.
Whoever's recording, can you stop recording?